I was always, dreaming of building a voice moat, right? A moat, you want to build for yourself a fortress where nobody can get near you, right? Just like, big companies, great companies like, Microsoft, Cisco, Checkpoint did, they were first, they excelled in building a very strong business, and then it's very difficult to come after them. So we're trying to do the same on the voice side.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Excited to do this one. A great guest here, and AudioCodes have been a huge supporter of Empowering Cloud. So first off, Shabtai, welcome to the podcast. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here with you this morning. As many of you know, I'm a co-founder of the company. Go back 31 years ago. I've co-founded it. Been an engineer, a development engineer in the voice space, and I'm CEO and president since then. I also served as the chairman for like 20 years, but then they pushed me a bit out. Never mind. So I'm an electrical engineer by education, right? And, I've been dealing a lot with, digital signal processing work back like 20, 30 years ago, and then dealt with system architectures. So I really love, that's why I'm still in that business. I love the work. I'd love to see, great new design and new solution coming out. What I love most about the industry play, and at AudioCodes is really, the strategy play. Because, as a CEO of a company, you really need to chart the company way throughout, changing markets, trends, new competition, new technologies, new application. And as we all know, take any successful technology company, if you don't reinvent yourself every 5-7 years, you're out of the game. So I see my key role as CEO really is to navigate through those times and always try to, while we work on, developing, marketing, and selling the current offering, we always need to look, forward, be, as they say in French, clairvoyant, right? See for the far. So that's why I love this game. I love the game because of, all these, strategy games. Been around in the industry for like 40 years now. Prior to that, I've served like 9 years in the Israeli army as an Intel development engineer. I'm prior to co-founding AudioCodes, I've co-founded another public company which was acquired like a year or two ago, called DSP Group. So DSP Group was developing chipsets based on DSP technology, and it was fun and wonderful. So long career in what I would say the voice industry, and then personally, I'm a happy father to 4. Great children, 2 elder sons, one which works at AudioCodes and helps me on navigating the new business, and one that is a psychologist. And then I have 2 little daughters, and they have been wonderful in bringing joy and light into my life. So pretty happy family around me. And I should also mention that, just became grandfather like 4 weeks ago.
Oh, so amazing. Congratulations. That's like, so multiple companies founded, founder, CEO, 4 kids. That's a lot going on.
That's a lot. And it's fun. You want to be in the action with, the family around you, the business that makes your life, interesting. That's why I am.
That's awesome. So like 30 years audios, or 31 now, amazing. Like from, telephony, hardware, very early in UC and the Microsoft partnership and seeing the potential in that. Now SaaS, conversational AI, kind of, you mentioned some of the innovation there. Take us through that journey, because it's quite impressive to do these kind of pivots and additions. Our industry changed so much over those 30 years.
Right. It's all about passion. So it's all about passion and, dealing with what you love to do. and, sitting on top of it, always, as I described before, looking around me to identify, what's going on and trying to, see ahead. So, yeah, we are a company that, as you have mentioned, we went up the food chain, right? We started as two algorithm guys, right? I mean, my co-founder, Leon, was exceptional in voice compression technology. I was a good engineer, but then we decided, okay, you Leon, takes R&D and technology. I'll take the rest of the company to take care of. So we went up the food chain from algorithms to chips. Algorithms was 92, 94. Chips was 95, 2000. We tried to sell chips to the leading DSP board company at that time. Names like, or elderly people here on the call, names like Dialogic, Natural Microsystem, Brook Trout. They didn't want to buy our chips. All they wanted to do is to license the technology. And we said, well, we won't make much business that way. So we want to build our own, cards and boards. And, we were lucky to become in 2 years, leader in the industry. So that was 97, 2000. Then, that was the era where, gateway were built out of, cards that were plugged into a PC. So name like VocalTech, VocalTech is the originator, etc. Then it was obvious that in order to optimize the product, you need to go to a carefully designed and built compact gateway. So we're lucky that happened side by side with the internet bubble crisis. So we had enough time to build our own gateways, and soon we became a leader in the gateway market. I think put aside Cisco, which has a huge captive market itself, we became number one in the gateways. So that's between 2002 and until today, actually. And then we did some acquisitions, some that worked, some that didn't. We were acquainted to the SBC world in 2006. There was a little startup in Dallas, Texas. So we thought we would ride with it. We were wrong, because I'll tell you what's the reason. It's a good lesson for anybody that listens. When there's a new market developing, always go with the least complex product. Always go from the low level and work your way upward. And the startup, and this was a pricey lesson, right? The startup we bought was, building a big, huge, SBC monster, which obviously nobody had any use for that when the market happens. So that was not successful, but then we decided internally that we would go and building our own technology, which started back in 2008 or 9. And since then, we became a leader. I mean, if you look to the own market studies, you'll see that in the enterprise world, because we do not target so much the service providers, so we became number one. I mean, we're holding a market share of like 23% in enterprise SBC. Oracle is like 20%, and all the rest are, below us. So those were, that was the SBC. But then we came to the conclusion that we really, and that it's actually tied up to Microsoft. We made a strategic decision back in 2000. We didn't know it was that strategic, right? But
I was going to ask this, how much vision you had as to Microsoft. They always come to disrupt the market, and they always say they're going to disrupt the market.
I have a funny story for you, okay? So I'll take you backwards, okay? In my previous company in 92, so we were voice guys. We were listening to ITU and standards. And then leading companies were names like Lucent and Alcatel and Nokia and Ericsson. And I was a fan of, the Nokia phone and phones, right? And then we have been approached by Intel. Intel was then working hand in hand with Microsoft, trying to start some work into the computer world with voice. And people came to me and told me, hey, listen, there's, Intel wants to do it. And I said, come on, guys, are you crazy? You've got those, huge, giant companies like, Lucent and Hotel and Alcatel and all this. you think that Intel will be able to? Well, I was wrong. And by the way, Microsoft was also part of that wrong. So I'm not the greatest strategist, if you will. So, 15 years later, I knew better than to not pay attention to Microsoft. So when Microsoft came out with OCS, Open Communication System, and at that time, Cisco and Avaya were, the leaders in that world, I said, well, you know what? They are coming with an application. They'll be faster, and they'll be and they have deep pockets. The other company, Avaya already then was not at its best times, so we took a decision to stick with Microsoft Lync back in 2010, and that is making our story until today, and I guess for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, that was my first introduction to AudioCodes. I was on the Cisco side of the fence, a Cisco partner. We were one of the 10 that launched Call Manager. That was my world. And then I kept seeing Microsoft moving. I was doing Exchange Unified Messaging. Then I was doing OTS integration to Call Manager. And that's where my first exposure to AudioCodes SBCs was. I jumped over to the Microsoft side of the fence at that point.
Yeah. So and quite frankly, I mean, we've been putting most of our weight behind that effort, right? And we were lucky. I mean, I need to, give huge thanks to our people, because I can be the greatest dreamer in the world, but if I don't have a good, strong R&D base that helps me, deliver that, and they came out with wonderful solution up until today. So we have we became fairly fast. I mean, we had a tough competition at that time. There was a company called Sonos Networks, which afterwards became Ribbon Communications.
Yep.
And they gave us a fight. But it's like back in 2015 was when they had a little crisis. They decided to back off enterprise and go to service provider, and we took advantage of that situation and move forward. But the more important step was, as I've mentioned before, going up the food chain, was that we said, well, enough is enough with selling, best of breed products. Okay. Yeah, we could be the best gateway and the best SBC, but we do not control the solution. And so we then decided to come up with, the concept of one voice. And one voice said to Microsoft at that time, Sky for Business, customers, it told them, hey guys, we bring you the majority of the components. So you don't need to run between different suppliers, take a gateway from that one, SBC from that one, a phone from that one, management from another company, recording. So we said, we'll do it all. And apparently that was the beginning of the most important, step we took. So we started to win more. And by the way, we just heard about 2 years after we made that move, throughout the graveyard, we heard that, VP of Marketing of Sonos said, well, that was the move that killed us, and we were not paying attention to it, right? So we came up with a great solution. And we followed through Microsoft evolution. So it was, Sky for Business. Then, together with Microsoft, we invested in, Sky for Business Online, which was not the greatest product on earth. They backed off, and then the competition. There was, 2 steps in the industry. Slack gave Microsoft a run. So Microsoft they had to come out with Teams. Which initially was a disaster to us. I said, why go for a new solution? We have Sky for Business. It's a great solution. Apparently, we were wrong. And thanks, we then, so we joined, if can't be them, join them. So we joined the Teams camp.
Yeah, that was a lot of disruption in our space at the time, because it was felt like a lot of the RFCs and RFIs were basically Cisco versus Sky for Business at that point. So we felt, or certainly I felt, the brand was known, the brand was well understood, the solution was understood. You fast forward, you couldn't, I don't think anybody could have foreseen this, but what happened in the pandemic and world events and the move to cloud, and now real normal people know what Teams is. It's such a different scale now than it was back in the Sky for Business days.
Yeah, and it was, the product was not mature. I think we got on the bandwagon somewhere in 18, 19. Product was not cooked yet.
Yeah.
think we all enjoyed, well, enjoyed is a harsh word. We did not enjoy pandemic, but pandemic really gave a huge boost to all that industry, right?
Yeah.
Working remotely and working from afar and being able to maintain, meetings and discussion and agents, contact center agents sitting remotely. So, I remember the numbers, right? December 19, Zoom had like 10 million customers, and Teams was like 17 or 18 million, clients. Go forward 6 months, Zoom boasted 200 or 300 million users, and Teams was always ranking up fast. So that was the evolution. And again, so if you ask me about AudioCodes and what's the main business we have, well, it's all centered about UCaaS and some CCaaS. I'll talk about the future in a minute, but it's mostly UCaaS. And in UCaaS, we, attach ourselves to Microsoft, which, these days holds like 40% market share, etc. And we say, so that's a strategy. Strategy is stay strong on Microsoft Teams arena and build yourself always upward, just not to leave any chance to your competition, because they will have to build all those layers. So it was then that we started to build, the live business. Live means our managed services, because at the end of the day, Microsoft Teams is pretty complex solution, and for large multinational companies, it's really tough to get into it. You need to hire, professionals and all around the world, and it's costly, etc. So we were successful with that offering. We can. We're glad that we started it back in 2020, and now this year we plan to end up with a business that's like 65 million annual recurring revenue.
Yeah, that's quite a big change, going from, there's two things you've touched on there. One, you widen the portfolio. So you started off in SBC, and now AudioCodes have the most certified solutions. So you've got contact center, you've got recording, you've got devices, you've got voice, you've got the cloud platform. But moving from hardware and boxes to SaaS platform, how was that transition?
Okay, well, I can tell you that, sitting in management meetings, right, back in, let's say, 2012, we knew we were a great, I would say, voice networking company. However, we scratched our head, and it was really tough for us to understand, how we're making that transition to the cloud business. And it was, it took us several years, but I can tell you that, I'm amazed. I mean, take the live platform. I mean, at the center of our, success with Microsoft is a new platform that we introduced about a year ago called the Live Platform. So Live Platform is really a combination that starts from, it starts with connectivity at the bottom with gateways and SBC. You add on top that management of devices and users and sites, and then you do some integration. Okay, so that is the basis, and it makes our deployments much faster. I mean, because otherwise, it's a long, tedious project.
Yeah.
So platform is that. Now the key, so we call that strategy land and expand. Okay, so we are capable of landing in various end user accounts true to our superiority in the connectivity business and management of users. But then we're coming up with a set of value-add applications, right? Value-add application. Just now think about, Gen AI coming to service with conversational AI. So we're gradually adding more and more services to that live platform, which again will fortify and solidify I was always, dreaming of building a voice moat, right? A moat, you want to build for yourself a fortress where nobody can get near you, right? Just like, big companies, great companies like, Microsoft, Cisco, Checkpoint did, they were first, they excelled in building a very strong business, and then it's very difficult to come after them. So we're trying to do the same on the voice side. Okay, and so those are the value-add applications.
That's awesome. And you touched on CCaaS and contact center there. So you've now got the Voca solution. Talk to me about your thinking around kind of UC and CC starting to come together.
For us, it's a blessing. For us, it's a blessing simply because, we see it, it's our glasses, probably other people would see it differently, but we see voice at the center of both, right? Because, your communication and collaboration solution, that serves your employees may then help you, you want to converge, the contact center, right? Until today, I think voice is like 50% of the traffic in contact center. So you better have a cohesive solution that takes care of the same technology components and serves the two. So we are among, the first. I think we had a great Enterprise Connect show earlier in March this year. And we think that convergence is happening, and obviously companies would like to have, a one combined solution.
And that's all, again, playing into this live platform play. So you can offer voice, you can offer recording, you can offer contact center, all on the same kind of platform to the customer.
And now, we're adding, a conversational AI to the mix, which further, elevates. Well, throughout the years, if you want to be competitive, the only way to be competitive these days, because there are many, other companies, is to, be able to penetrate and I would say conquer a little hill, but then add to it, integrate it, make it bigger and bigger and bigger. As you go bigger, those who come with some very brilliant solution next to you still are not capable of bringing, a complete solution, because it takes years and hundreds of, R&D people. So that is a lesson that we always, once we identify a trend or a product, we'll think about, okay, how you can, I hate the word, imperialism, but then how can you build an empire around that?
Yeah.
Okay? And that's the approach.
So last time we got to spoke, you were really talking loads about AI, and AI was definitely front of mind for you. It seems like AudioCodes are making some big moves in AI. Meeting Insights just won UC Today's Best of AI award. Like, There's lots of AI in the contact center conversation. So what was the thinking around Meeting Insights and your kind of AI strategy in general?
Okay, so it all started with me sitting daily, in 6, 7, 8 meetings a day, 30 minutes long. And, getting out of those meetings, you don't remember, what was decided, what were the action items, okay? And so we started to develop it prior to the pandemic. And it was awful because, the voice systems, the recording quality, the meeting rooms were awful. Okay, so it was really a slow start. We really struggled with all kind of issues. Then came pandemics, which drove a lot of, the collaboration solutions like Teams and Zoom. So that made the system substantially better in quality. It was spread. And now Microsoft, with their, meeting room initiative and Zoom, they all want to make your meeting room, the center of, the business and decisions. So we were able to obviously evolve from that initial product. The idea, listen, there are two levels, and basically here is something that I don't think many people paid attention to, but we are not the first note taker in the industry, right? I mean, you have series of startups, names like Otter and Alphoma and others, right? Which doing it they're doing it mainly more in the Zoom space, right? And then there are the big guys. You have Zoom and Microsoft who are also developing.
Yeah, they have their own first-party plays.
Okay, now, so I'm building the product as follows. Okay, we try to excel on the meeting level. Okay, so we take care of that. Recording and transcription. By the way, transcription is not an easy thing, simply because yes, you can get 80-90% accuracy, but once you get to different organizations, one from the sport arena, or are from government or politics or healthcare, the huge amount of concept and terms that a typical speech to text will not recognize.
Yeah, and arguably the most important terms for them and their company, right? They are the terms that decide whether we need A or B or what they meant.
Exactly. Now it's a chain, right? And the strength of the chain is related to the strength of each of the little pieces in it, right? So if you don't have a perfect STT, your inference, right? Your LLM solution and prompts and everything that comes afterwards will suffer because it will take different terms. So we pay a lot of attention, of course, to come up and we, we just launched a SaaS solution back in March. Fairly happy. These days we have already tens of customers, about 50 customers, growing fast, more than 10, 15 a month. But that's on the meeting level. But then, myself, I consider myself also, not only an engineer, but a manager. And to me, the fact that there's an important meeting that's taking place today in San Francisco with an important customer, and I, the decision maker, have no direct access to it. Because, yes, I'm told, it was a great meeting. Yes, they are interested. At the end of the day, like in any other step in the industry, you need to validate. And, once you get access to that recording, and of course, all those recording, 3 years ago, nobody in the industry wanted to hear about it. Nowadays, they ask you, well, do you have a recording of the session? I'd like to get it, okay? So you get the recording, you get to understand, who said what, speaker recognition technology, who said what, and then you get the insight for, I'm a project manager, you are a sales manager. We have different perspective on, what's the summary of that meeting, right? So we're getting all those recaps, and now we're putting them all, at AudioCodes these days, we are 1,000 employees and about 500 users daily. So in that environment, we have today close to 200 meetings a day. All those meetings, recording, transcription, and insights, they all go into one repository. And now management can assign small teams that focus, let's say, on SBC, or IP phone, recording. We can identify, right? We attach tags to every meeting, so we can pull out a bunch of meetings relating to a certain topic. And then I can work with, guess what? The best, chatbots in the world. Could be Copilot, could be Q, could be Gemini, could be Claude. And now, because these guys are doing, nice work, but not great work, right? I think everybody that's been using those chatbots know that, it's accurate up to a certain limit. Why? Because they do the search on a, huge, humongous amount of data.
Yeah.
If you narrate it down and take now meeting insight as a preprocessor, or identifies those, X meetings that relate to it, now the chatbot will do substantially better work. So that's how we're trying to position meeting insight.
So you're giving it like a better and more constrained data set. Like here's the data set you're working on, answer from this data set, but you've done all the work to make the transcription, the language specific to the customer, and all that data control is controlled by you and the customer.
Correct. Yes. So to me, meeting insight now is only about meeting insights, but it's also about business insights. And it drives, better decision making. Also drive, knowledge management. Think about the day that one of your best employee comes and say, "Hey, Tom, I'm leaving. I got a better offer, or I'm going overseas," and you're losing. You're losing. A lot of knowledge. However, think about having the company recording this guy and everybody's meeting for the past so many years. Now you bring a new guy,
Yeah, imagine if you could ask the history of a project, like why did we go this way? What did we do? Theoretically, all that knowledge could be captured in conversation.
now you're starting to scratch, the importance of, the prompts industry, right? Because that's at the end of the day, you interview me, and you well as I know that, the questions are the more important thing of anything. So if you ask the right questions in a good way, because prompts get to be sometimes very accurate and detailed, then you get great answers. So Meeting Insights just started a huge, journey into the future. And we adding, we're talking to customers, every customer brings up, a new angle of sight. So it's really exciting. And I think it's got a great future. So
that's great to understand. And that's your thinking about sustained differentiation, because as you said, Zoom are going to do it first party, Microsoft can do it first party, but the things you can do to help the end customer in a particular way, like everything at the moment in the first party solutions is very personal or that group based, whereas because you're controlling the data, you can again, subject to the customer wanting to, let's span all the calls in this department or all the contacts and scenarios or all the engineering meetings. You can go bigger on your data sets.
Absolutely. It's like, the saying 9 ways to skin a cat. So 1,000 ways to skin a meeting. And it's great. And then, now I'm stepping one step further. Okay. Because if you ask me, okay, where is the future of the company? So, on one end, we put our bets on, the live business and the live platform for the UCaaS and Microsoft Teams business on one end. But then, there's huge opportunity that's starting up right now in the conversational AI business. Now, here, by the way, there are two ways in which we go to market. Okay, one which is very simple, the traditional, right? We, Gidi is great, and his partner Elad great in, coming up with Voca CAC, which is a great, a first solution for Microsoft Teams. So that's a first leading, SaaS application. We have SmartApp, which is a very nice, either compliance or interaction recording solution. That also is a great SaaS application. And then Meeting Insights. So on one end, we will try to come up with applications that each target a different need, but then they are fully, I would say, closed or would evolve, but still it's all surrounding. But what happens now if you go, and we worked here with the Israeli Red Cross organization. So their biggest issue is they're getting, millions of calls every year, hundreds of calls an hour. And they need to resolve, A, what's happening, and B, they need to resolve the most important thing, which is, where do I send the ambulance? Because if you have 2 names of cities which are spread 100 kilometers far from the other one, okay, and names in the UK doesn't come up, but that are very close. You can think about yourself, Yorkshire and Berkshire, and just think about that. It would be a disaster if you just sent the ambulance to the wrong address, right? So to make that solution work, we started with some real bad, noisy cellular phones. So the accuracy rate of the SCT was like 40%. So we had to connect to telephony. We had to build a good networking solution because it went into a contact center. We had to attach recording to it. We had to put some management solution to control of the devices. We had to do transcription. Now we build, some inference solution on top of that using LLM technology. Think about how many organizations in this world, that are in possession of all those diverse set of technologies and tools. We're lucky that we have that 30 years behind us, that we've developed all that, telephony and networking, all that stuff, that now we can throw into the game, conversational AI, and now you come up with a perfect recipe. So we put huge effort in developing, not only SaaS solution, but also what I would call custom SaaS or custom projects for big companies, because everybody needs to customize it for is, a telephony network or CRM or anything like that.
You've got both angles. You can build end user AI products like Meeting Insights. You can infuse AI into things like Voca and Contact Center in your products, but you can also leverage that technology for larger bespoke solutions for customers.
Right. So that's why you hear me excited in this call, because we did a lot, but that's great thing to do going forward. So on one end, it's Microsoft Teams and Live business, contact center business, and then the conversational AI, which is completely new venue for us.
Awesome. Well, Shabtai, thanks so much for taking the time to talk us through the amazing journey in the product portfolio. And I'm really excited as well about AI and what our space is going to look like in the next few years.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tom. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And obviously, let's stay in touch, and let's meet every so many months, and we can talk about the new things we see around.
I'd love to do that, yeah. And I appreciate your support of everything we've been doing over the years and AudioCodes support. So thanks for that.
Sure. Glad to do that.